robbing banks, gambling addictions, dressing as a wolf to Kansas City Chief football games. What if I told you the person we're talking about today was all of those things at once? Did all of those things at once. You get it. That's because today we're going to be talking about Chiefsaholic, the previously famous Kansas City fan who wore a wolf costume to all the games, but is now more infamously known as a serial bank robber. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. The NFL is no stranger to controversy. Cheating scandals, criminal charges, questionable officiating, polarizing political statements, you name it. And fans are no stranger to controversy as well. Sure, as important as fans are to the game, it's pretty rare for one of them to create a public spectacle that overshadows the players and the teams themselves. But when that team is none other than the recent two-time Super Bowl champion, the Kansas City Chiefs, there's only one fan who has recently transcended the sport itself to steal the spotlight. And while I'm talking about a famous Kansas City Chiefs fan, for once it's not Taylor Swift. No, I am of course talking about Chiefsaholic, the Twitter sensation who went to a Chiefs game fully dressed like an actual wolf. A staple of home games, tailgates, and unofficial team events, Chiefsaholic rose to celebrity status thanks to his unwavering loyalty and fanaticism. And also, the wolf costume. From his regular game day seats along the sidelines, the wolf fan hybrid was known for keeping the crowds energized. He traveled to away games to antagonize opposing teams, where fellow fans and enemies alike would approach him for pictures. He was, for lack of a better term, an internet celebrity. I hate using that word unironically, but sure. From 2019 onward, Chiefsaholic amassed around 40,000 followers on Twitter and 10,000 on Instagram. He would post regularly to Twitter, flaunting his inside access, posting giveaways, hosting trivia competitions, and most notoriously, placing extravagant bets on his beloved team. With sports betting being as popular as it is, it's no surprise that the dude who dressed as a wolf for every game would participate. That's not even really a dig against sports betting or anything. Just if you saw a werewolf at a football game, I would bet money that he was betting money on it. As his status in the Chiefs community grew, followers of his Twitter account became more and more endeared to the crazed, masked maniac who loved their team just as much as they did. They started becoming more involved in his personal life, publicly rooting for him to score a date with Chiefs fans Instagram influencer Abby Burner. They tweeted at the official Chiefs account, demanding the team to publicly recognize their number, one fur-covered fan. Now, all of this is fairly normal in terms of modern social media fame. What isn't as normal is the fact that throughout his ascent to internet stardom, the man behind the wolf mask was a total mystery. Almost nothing was known about who Chiefsaholic really was. Nothing about what he did for a living, where he was located, although we can assume probably somewhere around Kansas City, and not even his name. As a result, things eventually got weird, but more on that in a bit. So here's what people did know. Chiefsaholic obviously had to be wealthy. For starters, the seats he regularly sat in cost hundreds of dollars. But secondly, Chiefsaholic had a habit of placing lots of large bets on his favorite team. So clearly, the dude was loaded to some degree. Wanting to know how he got where he did financially, followers on Twitter would sometimes ask how he could afford such an extravagant lifestyle. In response, Chiefsaholic said that, after graduating from Kansas State, he was earning $12 an hour working at a warehouse. And then, after a number of years, he had turned this entry-level gig into a well-paying job managing an entire Midwest region of warehouses, and was now making a, quote, excellent living for himself at only 28 years old. But beyond that, details were vague. So because of that tidbit, fans also knew his age, that he was 28 years old, and that was pretty much it. He was a 28-year-old warehouse manager with front row seats to every Chiefs home game, who often traveled to away games, owned lots of impressive team memorabilia, and had an affinity for sports betting. On Twitter, Chiefsaholic said he hustled in private and was playing with house money, which are interesting statements to remember for later. During the 2022-23 season, Chiefsaholic attended nearly every home and away game. Because he was starting to become so well known, especially within his particular circle, he began employing increasingly complicated tactics to maintain his privacy. He would walk miles from the stadium in his full wolf getup in order to avoid people identifying and tracking his vehicle. While pumping gas or eating in public, he would wear disposable gloves to hide his fingerprints. It is like the level of identity protection that Batman would have to go through. but it was a guy who wore a wolf costume to football games. Hilariously, he never employed the simplest solution to maintaining his privacy, which would have been to stop going to these games dressed like a wolf. If he wanted to avoid being identified, he could have started buying different seats, dressed as a normal fan, and deleted his social media. But clearly, as you probably figured, there was something he loved about being a local celebrity, even if it risked something that was apparently extremely important to him, his privacy. Despite his efforts, some people online wanted to know exactly who this person was, and thus rumors and theories began. Some suspected that Chiefsaholic was struggling financially, despite claiming otherwise. They suggested that maybe the reason he parked so far away was because he was living out of his car. And these theories aren't entirely far-fetched. If you've been on the internet for any amount of time, you've probably seen a story of someone getting so addicted to gambling that they lose their home, they lose a lot of their social standings or relations, but they'll continue gambling. Especially when, in Chiefsaholic's case, there's notoriety attached to it. One thing that never made sense to anyone paying close attention were his prolific gambling expenses. He would regularly place bets of $5,000 or more, upwards of $20,000 on Kansas City, as well as on prop bets with increasingly long odds. It's well understood in the betting world that an above-average bettor still wins just above 50% of their wagers, and that's if they're doing really good. Chiefsaholic rarely posted his losses, but he had to have been losing money at an enormous rate. Even for a warehouse manager making the aforementioned excellent living, this would be difficult to maintain on such a salary. But regardless, Chiefsaholic's public, mysterious life continued to play out on social media, especially on game day. He traveled to away games in opponent cities across the country, announcing his travels on Twitter and Instagram. But it was during one of the Chiefs' away games that everything started to unravel. On December 18th, 2022, the Chiefs visited Houston to play the Texans. Chiefsaholic had announced he was going to Texas for the game, but as the day of the game approached, he never arrived. His social media went dark, which was already highly unusual for him. Chiefsaholic remaining silent on game day raised serious concerns to those who were following. Relevant social media circles immediately began speculating that something had gone wrong. I mean, after all, someone who thrives in the spotlight of internet fame wouldn't stop posting on social media for no reason. But the fact that he did so in the middle of a trip to see his team play with a chance to lock up the division championship was unimaginable. Fans began tagging the Chiefs' official accounts to spread word of his disappearance. Social media bloodhounds were called in to hunt for potential clues regarding his whereabouts and status, which I understand people were keeping up with this guy, and, you know, him showing up at games and making a big deal of himself was a recurring thing, so I understand why they were concerned, but at the same time, he is a guy who shows up to football games. If he's out of service for a few hours, we don't need to get the police involved. I mean, as you're going to find out, we did need to get the police involved, but no one knew that yet. As the days dragged on with radio silence from his accounts, the internet continued to formulate theories on what could have possibly happened to him. Maybe he had ran into trouble on the way to the game, stuck somewhere between Kansas City and Texas. Had he been in an accident? Was it some sort of family crisis pulling all of his attention off the internet and into the real world? Well, as concerned as people seemed to be, no one was able to uncover anything due to Chiefsaholic's surrounding aura of mystery. There was virtually no information for anyone to go off of. No name, no address, no idea what car he drove or what his face looked like. At this point, it could have been anyone. I mean, for all we knew, he showed up to the game just without the wolf costume. That's when the big guns were called in. Christian Folsom, also known as Folsom Facts on Twitter. The amateur internet sleuth had been tagged to help concerned followers find the real identity of Chiefsaholic. That way, they could confirm whether or not he was in danger and needed help. Well, after doing some digging, Folsom was able to land a major lead in the case. The man known as Chiefsaholic had a name, Xavier Babudar. Also, according to Babudar himself, his first name is not pronounced Xavier, but it's pronounced as caviar, but instead of a C, it's an X, so Xavier? There's absolutely no way. I'm calling him Xavier. Folsom, with the help of another detective, also learned that Xavier may have actually been driving to Chiefs away games. Using this breakthrough information, they traced Babudar's likeliest route from Kansas City to Houston. Based on when Xavier left Kansas City, they estimated the general area where he should have been at the time of his disappearance. To Together, they scoured hospital admittance records, obituaries, and news stories looking for any possible sign of harm that may have come to someone with that name, but didn't find anything. Again, an absurd level of detective work normally to go into someone that just shows up to Kansas City Chiefs games, but given where this goes, I guess they were right this time. So where did Xavier go, and why suddenly drop off the map? Well, Folsom had a theory. The internet sleuths began searching for stories on local crimes in major cities along the way, thinking perhaps Babudar had ran into some trouble with the law on the road to Houston. While combing the internet for such stories in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they discovered something truly shocking. And that was an arrest record in Bixby. Neighboring suburb of Tulsa reported that Babudar had been arrested for armed robbery. Xavier, the enthusiastic superfan, again, the guy that dressed like a wolf, had just robbed a bank in Oklahoma for $150,000. Oh my gosh, it's so weird. 2 days before the Chiefs were slated to face the Texans in Houston, the man known as Chiefsaholic entered Tulsa Teachers Federal Credit Union in Bixby, Oklahoma. Armed with a handgun, he ordered a bank employee to open the vault and put the money in a plastic bag, saying that he would shoot if they didn't comply. A bank teller managed to contact police as the robbery was ongoing, and as Babudar attempted to flee on a bicycle. Why would he be on a bicycle? Was he biking to the games? He was caught and arrested for $150,000 in stolen cash, a mask, and a black CO2 pistol. So obviously he never had the capacity to actually shoot anyone with anything other than a BB, and the CO2 pistol was just to appear as he had a gun to those who were none the wiser. The news sent shockwaves throughout the online community, as you could imagine. I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. You're looking for a guy who didn't show up to a football game, and you found a $150,000 bank robbery. This had now garnered interest beyond the Kansas City Chiefs as people dug deeper into Chiefsaholic's disappearance. Whatever theories people had formed, arrested for armed robbery certainly wasn't among them. As people processed this news, including his newly revealed identity, stories began to trickle out from people who knew him in real life. One of these was a woman named Lindsay True from Phoenix, Arizona. She had met Xavier through Chief's Twitter and went out with him one night. On their date, Xavier told Lindsay the same story he had told people on the internet, that he was a Kansas State grad who managed warehouses and lived in an affluent part of St. Louis. He also told her he loved his mom and had family in LA. But as we would soon learn, the truth and Xavier are rarely in the same place at the same time. As it turns out, Babudar never went to Kansas State. He didn't manage a warehouse, and he was indeed homeless and living out of his car. Although he had a lot of cash in his possession, he appeared to have a serious addiction to sports betting and spending in general when it came to his beloved Chiefs. In addition to the regular bets he had posted about online, Xavier had a check in his car for $78,000 from a casino and 2 bank accounts totaling roughly $58,000 in assets. But in order to continue placing large bets, he would have to have kept much of that on hand as cash. There was also the belief, although never confirmed, that just months before the Tulsa robbery, he was the person behind a mysterious $80,000 bet at the Hollywood Casino in Kansas City. The casino sportsbook posted the ticket to social media, and local news even ran a story about the large bet, with rumors circulating at the time as to who had placed it. The wager was for the Chiefs to beat their closest conference rival, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were favored in that game, and Buffalo defeated Kansas City 24-20. In the aftermath of his arrest, multiple patrons at the Hollywood Casino said sportsbook employees had told them it was Babudar who had placed the bet. Because while there would be records of it at the casino, that's not the kind of thing the casino would normally publicly release to the media, unless, of course, that guy got arrested for, armed robbery. I also have to imagine if you were living out of your car and had $80,000 riding on a football game that you lost in a 24-20 score, you probably wouldn't want to go pick up that ticket either. That December, Xavier had also attended a charity event put on by Chiefs MVP quarterback Patrick Mahomes, which cost $1,250 to attend. At the event, Babudar acquired an autographed painting of Mahomes priced at $10,000. So it seems that he not only had a crippling addiction to sports betting or betting in general, but also to Chiefs memorabilia, spending ludicrous amounts on it when he could barely afford his living situation as is. Or not afford it at all. I guess if you're living out of your car, then your getaway vehicle would have to be a bike. Otherwise, if you use the car, then it's kind of like robbing the bank and using your house as a getaway vehicle, I guess. There should probably be one level of separation between what you use to get the money away and where you keep it. So in hindsight, the bike makes sense. And all these details came to light while Xavier was behind bars, as his personas, public and private, began to merge. Meanwhile, the internet ran wild with stories, some true and some not. Pictures began circulating of a bank robbery from 2016 in DeKalb, Illinois, sure, in which the perpetrator wore a wolf mask and a hat while holding up a bank teller. But the Bixby DA and Oklahoma City FBI both confirmed their understanding that Babudar had not been involved in any other such crimes. Which, if everyone knew him as Chiefsaholic and as the guy who wore a wolf mask to football games, then the last thing you would want to rob a bank in is another or the same wolf mask. In court, Xavier pled not guilty. Despite some impressive casino winnings, he couldn't afford an attorney. After 7 weeks in jail, he requested his $200,000 bail be lowered to $80,000, a request that was granted on the condition he wear an ankle monitor and not leave Oklahoma. 4 days before Super Bowl 57, Xavier was released on bail. So now a camera crew, which was filming Xavier for a documentary about his story because, duh, attended the signing of his bond release documents and watched the Super Bowl with him. During the game, Xavier talked about the bets he'd placed on the game the year before, including a $5,000 bet that the Chiefs would win and another $5,000 on Mahomes winning Super Bowl MVP. Not to spoil anything, but the Chiefs did in fact win and Mahomes got MVP, netting Xavier a $100,000 payout. Now, unfortunately for Xavier, the victory was short-lived, as on February 24th, 2023, the date of his first court appearance, he was served a civil lawsuit from Peyton Garcia, a bank teller he had threatened in the Tulsa robbery. March 25th, perhaps to avoid paying out the suit, Xavier cut his ankle monitor and fled the state of Oklahoma. Which is wild to be like, all right, I'm pleading not guilty and I'm going to the first court appearance for this legal case. Oh, what's that? Someone that I pointed a fake gun at is now suing me? Well, I guess I'm going to get in trouble with them and the federal government now. And believe it or not, this is where things took a truly wild turn, because an internet famous football fan dressed like an animal robbing one bank was apparently not insane enough for this guy, because while on the run, law enforcement discovered evidence of Xavier robbing multiple banks over the course of the previous year. Not 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 or 9, but 11 attempted robberies in that span of time. You would think that the guy who is this risk-seeking, the guy who bets all the money he has, he lives out of his car, and he's betting these 5-6-figure bets at casinos and on sports games, and he dresses as a giant wolf everywhere he goes. You think this dude cannot get away with 11 attempted robberies with no one noticing, yet here we are. Now, some of these attempts were more successful than others, so let's count them out. The first was on March the 2nd of 2022, in which he stole $70,000 from a branch of Great Western Bank in Clive, Iowa, accidentally left behind a black glove that investigators later recovered and matched his DNA from. The second, April 28th, 2022, he stole $170,860 from First National Bank of Omaha in Omaha, Nebraska, lost $163,560 of it because a die pack went off in his bag and he ditched the ruined money, meaning he walked away with a little over $7,000. The third, July 13th, 2022, he stole $303,845 from First Class Community Credit Union in West Des Moines, Iowa. The fourth, November 17th, 2022, he stole $125,900 from the Tennessee Credit Union in Nashville, Tennessee. This one's notable because he threatened the employees to not put a die pack in his bag or he would come back to kill them. He left behind a hat with DNA in it that was later matched to the DNA in the glove from the first robbery, which again was later matched to him. The fifth was only 12 days later, on November 29th of 2022, when he attempted to rob Wings Financial Credit Union in Savage, Minnesota, but he fled the scene after the employees opened the vault and he saw they only had small bills. The sixth robbery was the same day on November 29th, 2022, when he drove from the First Credit Union over to the Royal Credit Union in Apple Valley, Minnesota. The same thing happened. Employees opened the vault. It only contained small bills, so he left. So since he had two unsuccessful ones in one day, for his seventh robbery on November the 30th, the next day, he then steals $25,000 from First Interstate Bank in Clive, Iowa. This was the same facility he had robbed on March 2nd, 2022, just under a different name. Not that he was under a different name. No one knew his name at all during this time. The bank was under a different name. So then, 2 weeks after that, on December 15th of 2022, he attempted to rob Pinnacle Bank in Papillion, Nebraska, pulled on the doors, and they were locked, so he gave up. That one, like, he was definitely there to rob the bank, but I have also gone up to banks that were past closed and then, like, yanked on the doors and then left. So I guess in some small way, we've all attempted to rob a bank. And keeping with his previous behavior of robbing 3 banks in 24 hours when the first 2 robberies didn't work, after this robbery on December 15th didn't work, the next day, on December 16th, he stole $139,500 from Tulsa Teachers Federal Credit Union in Bixby, Oklahoma, which, as mentioned earlier, was the one he got arrested at, making an escape on a bicycle. So that gives us a total of 9. But after cutting his ankle monitor and then making a run for it, he robbed 2 more times. The 10th was on June the 8th of 2023 when he stole $1,100 from Heritage Bank in Sparks, Nevada, and then July the 3rd when he stole $950 from U.S. Bank in El Dorado Hills, California. So those total out to like $2,000. So not as adventurous as his previous journeys, but this time he was a wanted man, so I guess he had to play it safe. To get into those last 2 robberies more while he was on the run, for the first one that was on June the 8th, Xavier admitted that he stole $1,100 from Heritage Bank in Sparks, Nevada. He entered the bank wearing a beanie, a COVID-19 mask, and a blue long-sleeve shirt, khaki pants, and a fanny pack. Xavier showed a note to the Heritage Bank teller that was composed on his cell phone, which demanded money from the teller. This type of robbery seemed more out of desperation than looking for a big score. He demanded money from the teller's drawer rather than full access to the bank's vault. It can be imagined, since he was on the run and didn't have access to money, that he needed cash quickly, and the only way this guy seemingly knew how to make money was betting at casinos and robbing banks, so he did the second one. So then he did a similar quick robbery technique on July the 3rd when Xavier admitted that he entered a U.S. bank in El Dorado Hill, California, wearing a gray hoodie, COVID-19 mask again, and a yellow reflective vest. Xavier showed the same note on his cell phone to the U.S. bank teller demanding money, another small score, having made off with, again, just $950. I've covered a lot of bank robberies on the main channel, and a lot of situations where the same robbers got through multiple robberies before they were ever suspected by the police or arrested. But typically, those are back in like the 80s and 90s, and all of these happened in 2022 and 2023. So the fact that you can still, in modern day, get by with like 11 bank robberies is kind of inspiring. Now, I'm no psychologist, but all of this reckless behavior, even after being caught, seems to point to someone suffering from some pretty serious addictions, which, given his upbringing, does make some sense. Life for Xavier began far away from Kansas City, in the enclave of Laguna Beach, California. Born to parents Michael and Carla Babudar, his early childhood years were considered privileged. He, his parents, and brother Noah lived in a 2,400 square foot home in one of the wealthiest towns in the United States. But when Xavier was 9 years old, his father Michael filed for bankruptcy. Shortly after, everything else came crashing down around them. Xavier's father, who had been cited for a minor traffic infraction, accepted community service to offset the ticket's cost. But when he went out to serve his duty, he never returned to Xavier's family. Already struggling financially, the family was left with nothing. Xavier's mother did the best she could, but the Babudars floated around between multiple states, essentially homeless, oftentimes sleeping in their parked car outside of grocery stores. It's not known exactly why Xavier's father left. Maybe it was shame out of what happened. More than likely, there was other factors within the family that led to it. Maybe, something happened to his dad. But also back then, if you wanted to abandon your family forever, there wasn't like internet or anything, so you could go 12 miles away and never see him again. The fall from grace left Xavier searching for a way back to the top. His life of crime started small, committing petty thefts at local stores and forging meal certificates at all-you-can-eat buffets. And as he grew into adulthood, the nomadic lifestyle and small crimes continued, being arrested once for petty theft. Not much is known about when exactly his gambling habits began, but it isn't hard to imagine that his fascination with casinos started, in part, due to their 24-hour access. I mean, think about it. They provided a place to hang out, often with cheap or even free food and drink. You can go in and out unbothered, with nobody passing judgment on you. For a nomad, a casino would have been like an oasis in the desert. It's also worth mentioning, to some degree, he had to be good at it. I mean, sure, he got a lot of money from robbing banks, but seemingly he got a lot of money from sports bets or gambling in casinos as well. Now, was he good about managing those winnings and saving them up to make something substantial for himself? No, but someone had to win the money in the first place. Now, there's no doubt Xavier Babudar was a genuine fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. The team spent decades as a middling team in the AFC, with a few playoff runs here and there, but no Super Bowl win since 1970. In 2019, however, everything changed behind the brilliance of Patrick Mahomes and the genius of head coach Andy Reid. And as the team dominated the league, Babudar probably realized that this was a perfect storm of opportunity. He could use casinos to launder the stolen bank money for him, while giving himself the opportunity to increase his gains by betting on his favorite team. This would raise the stakes of each game to extreme heights, making Kansas City's victories even sweeter for him. Of course, that also meant the losses were that much more devastating. But that factor is often overlooked by anyone struggling with an addiction to sports gambling, or someone who is relying on money they're about to steal from a bank. On the run, Xavier's legendary status only seemed to grow. Fans on social media demanded he be let free. Former Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce, brother of Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce, offered a fugitive a spot on their rapidly growing podcast, ensuring his protection from police, when Jason said in a tweet, quote, "Chiefsaholic, I don't know where you are, but my brother and I would love to have you on the new Height show to tell your story. We will go wherever and disclose nothing for the sake of journalism." Which, I'm just saying, like, it's not like the Kelceys said that they want to exonerate him. The people who were saying that were either just trolling or stupid. Kelce was just saying, let's get him on the podcast. And I, for one, completely agree. We got to get this guy on a podcast. Xavier did not accept the invitation, however, which is probably a smart move for someone who does not want to be caught. Even so, after a nationwide manhunt by the U.S. Marshals and FBI, he was arrested as of now for the final time on July the 7th, 2023 in Sacramento. With a litany of charges and facing nearly a lifetime in prison, Babudar pled guilty and corroborated with authorities to give them the full timeline of his amassed fortune. In each case, he wore the same mask, not a wolf mask, I should add, goggles and gloves. He acted alone and would bark out the same list of demands. Bark. Okay. Things like, take me to the vault and fill the bag up with cash. Across 7 states, he had stolen a total of $847,725 from multiple financial institutions. And on February the 28th, 2024, he was sentenced to 17 and a half years in federal prison. While he was technically given 2 17-and-a-half-year-long sentences, one in Missouri, the other in Oklahoma, he is serving them concurrently. So 17 and a half years in total, or in total at the same time. Concurrent, you know what I mean. He was also ordered to pay over $530,000 in restitution to victim financial institutions, as well as forfeit any property gained from his money laundering. This includes the autograph painting of Patrick Mahomes that was recovered by the FBI. Also, I see sometimes when I talk about these criminal cases, like, for example, when I said he had stolen like $850,000 and he's ordered to pay $530,000, people will be like, well, that doesn't make any sense because he stole more than that. So what? He gets to keep $300,000? If they find that you stole money, you don't get to keep the stolen money. It's not like if a mob boss has $100 million when the police get him, they're not like, well played. Well, we'll keep this nice and safe for you till you get out. It's like, no, they take that, and now you owe an additional $530,000. And then there was the civil lawsuit from the bank teller Peyton Garcia. Xavier was ordered to pay her an astonishing $10.8 million. Although he obviously does not have that money, the suit is intended to confiscate any earnings he might stand to gain from life rights or films or TV series, book deals, and so forth. essentially diverting those funds to her. For someone who relished being in the spotlight, even anonymously, this has to sting Xavier the most. One final piece that I found interesting is the judge's ruling in the civil lawsuit, which addresses a long-standing battle over who gets to profit from the actions of well-known criminals. O.J. Simpson, for example, wrote the book If I Did It, about how he would have, hypothetically, killed his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ron Goldman, which has always been insane to me, by the way. Imagine if your wife died, right? And then you fought for years that someone else did it, and it's so tragic that your wife was murdered. And then, like, decades later, you write a book about how you hypothetically would have murdered your wife. I know we all know that the guy did it, but just imagine, because he's claiming he didn't, imagine a world where you didn't murder your wife, but you write a fanfic later on about how you would have murdered your wife. Like, what planet are we living in? Okay, whatever. A federal bankruptcy judge awarded those rights to the victim's family, which was later published with the subtitle Confessions of the Killer, which is really funny that he's flat out like, if I hypothetically did it, and then they attach the subtitle that he is the killer confessing to his crimes. But I also remember in like the early publications or the early prints of it, there was some note the family had to make the word if really small or like appear in the top left, so it looks like the book cover just says, I did it, O.J. Simpson. Another example is Jordan Belfort, who Leonardo DiCaprio played in The Wolf of Wall Street, was offered a $500,000 advance from book publisher Random House and sold the film rights for over $1 million to a company called Red Granite. This is in despite of the fact that Belfort was supposed to pay $110 million to victims of his numerous acts of fraud. The U.S. government publicly stated their intent to confiscate half of that, but it does not appear that they ever followed through with it. Understand I am moving far off the plot of Chiefsaholic, but I think this is cool, so get over it. Interestingly enough, Red Granite itself was caught up in a massive multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme in which they siphoned massive amounts of money from a Malaysian state fund. The co-founder of that company, who is also the stepson of a former Malaysian prime minister, is currently under arrest in that country. But I digress. I'll do a video about it at some point, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, back to the Chiefsaholic case. In this case, the judge's ruling once again attempts to change the landscape regarding convicted felons who want to profit off their stories. Today, Xavier Babudar is being held at the Federal Correction Complex, Florence, or FCC Florence, alongside other notorious criminals like the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh, the Boston Marathon bomber, and El Chapo. While his acts were nowhere near as violent or horrifying as those, he will spend many years behind bars, thinking about his life up to this point. One final note, this past year in 2025, the Kansas City Chiefs made it to their third Super Bowl in a row, hoping to become the first team in NFL history to three-peat. Instead, they were blown out 40-22 by the Philadelphia Eagles. So I would imagine that on this rare occasion, Xavier's probably happy he didn't have any money on that game. Or if he did, I guess he would have just stolen it back later. And that is the story of Chiefsaholic, the Kansas City Wolfman who robbed a bunch of banks. This is a story that is so weird, I couldn't not talk about it. So I'm happy that you guys decided to not listen, and it means a lot, and I just want to say thank you for watching. We're trying out something new here on the second channel. Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Everyone who helped work on this video will be listed in the description, so be sure to show them some love. I hope that you enjoyed, and there will be more content on the way soon. But for now, I just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!